We had a collaboration with some Chinese scientists.
Here we have a vaccine. What is the problem? Get over it.
Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
I hope that it can occur in a civil way. And I mean civil in a special way, peaceful.
The biggest question maybe in economics and politics of the coming decade will be what to do with all these useless people.
I just see the need for such a dialogue, and I see the need for action. I see the need for a great reset.
January 18th, 2023. The second day of the meeting at the World Economic Forum. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Johnny Anderson alongside Bruce Adams and from cuttingthroughthematrix.com, Weston. Bruce, let's start with you today. How are you?
Healthy and alive, yeah.
Glad to hear it. And from cuttingthroughthematrix.com, Weston. How are you today, Weston?
Doing great. We're pretty excited this week at Cutting Through the Matrix because we have we're going to launch a new podcast on Thursday.
Looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to that. I look to be subscribing.
Yeah, and so it's just an introduction episode this week because it's the first one. But yeah, we're going to do more. We're going to be talking to other people and so on. So hopefully it will be great.
And I hope your behind-the-scenes planning is going very well since our last talk. I hope you guys are making progress on that.
Yeah, no. In fact, there's been some exciting developments that we're going to have there's going to be more, well, actually, I guess not really more new series, but there's definitely going to be more things that we're going to be posting on the website. And besides just the usual excerpts, which I'm also going to post up another excerpt along with this talk like I normally do. So we're just extremely busy, really.
That's great. Like I said, I'm looking forward to that. And when you guys have that up and running, I'll be subscribing, as I say, and I'll be dropping the plugs here on our platform as well for our listeners to get directed over to you guys. I wish you all the luck in the world in getting that off the ground. Like I said, if you got any questions, comments, or whatever, just shoot me or Bruce a message, and we'll help you out in any way we can. So we wish you guys all the luck in the world and all the success in the world with that. So moving on from that, day 2 of the World Economic Forum. Where would you like to start? I have some bad news. Klaus Schwab, as I said yesterday, he didn't make the opening ceremony. It's a shame. You hate to see that, don't you? You hate to see that. I genuinely, as I said yesterday, I was really looking forward to that. I wanted to hear the speech from the man, the executive chairman. I wanted to hear it, even though the whole thing was going to be completely nonsensical and a farce and hypocritical and everything else. I still wanted to hear it from the horse's mouth. Not to mention Jacinda Ardern, which I don't even know if she's going to be there this year. She's usually an honored guest, but unfortunately, he's not there. And you know who else didn't make it? Apart from George Soros, Bill Gates. Bill Gates did not make it this year. I'm deeply hurt. I was hoping to see old Bill up there on the stage too. But yet I'm not going to get a speech from George Soros. I'm not going to get a speech from Klaus Schwab in the opening. I'm not going to get a speech from Bill Gates. I mean, these are speeches that we can pick apart. Instead, I got to listen to Al Gore. I got to listen to Brian Stelter. I got to listen to John Kerry. And we do have some audio from Klaus today. He was spotted this morning. He met with the Pakistani prime minister, and he was giving a talk about the metaverse, which I think we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We're going to talk a little bit about the virtual world that they're trying to create and actually how they got us to this point in the first place. But yet, I understand the point of the virtual world. I see what they're trying to do with it. But at the same time, I also see the company like Facebook, Meta. I see them that have introduced it, and it's just not there. It's just not popular. It's not taken off. And Bruce, you've got some experience in the whole VR thing, as in not spending hours and hours and hours in it, but you know more about it than I do, or I don't know if Weston, if you've been in there or not, but I haven't.
No, I haven't been. I've never been in VR.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about the climate today. We're going to talk about 15-minute cities today and all this stuff. And, this is all fascinating conversations that we're going to have. This is all going to be topics that you're going to hear the buzzwords for, the 15-minute cities, the climate change and the inclusivity and all that stuff, trust and everything else that these people talk about. But you know what? At the end of it, this is all window dressing, isn't it? That's what this is. This is all window dressing. This is a topic that we can discuss from now until the end of time. Ideologically, we're out in the middle of the field somewhere talking about all this stuff. When in reality, what we need to be doing is we need to be getting back on the road, the main road, and headed to a destination away from these people. What we need to do is we need to be thinking, at least those of us that are paying attention, those of us that have been eyes up to the situation from the start, we need to be paying attention to where we want to be on the other side of this, because we don't want to go down that road, do we? Because I certainly don't. I don't want to be anywhere near that. Mm-hmm. So we need to be putting ourselves above this. But in the meantime, we can discuss these nonsensical policies because it's just fun, right? We're gonna have fun with that today. What would you like to start? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, jump in there. Go ahead.
It sounds like the World Economic Forum has taken a step down in prestige, because now you have people like Brian Stelter, a mainstream media CNN guy, and you have Al Gore. I mean, basically, you don't have the leading, like Klaus Schwab. He's off somewhere meeting the Pakistani prime minister, you said. And then you had, who knows what George Soros and Bill Gates are doing right now, but they just don't see the World Economic Forum as important enough for them anymore. So I think it's like they've sort of taken a blow in prestige almost, I think. This
was Klaus this morning. As I said, he was spotted backstage meeting with the Pakistani prime minister there. And this is, I mean, obviously you can tell that that's this year's because that's the badge. They're all about the badges this year. They're all proudly displaying their badges. The blue cards with the white line. That's the one that'll get you in everywhere. Which it's his forum supposedly. It's like Henry Kissinger. He actually made it. Kissinger was down there advocating for NATO to take Ukraine immediately. So bring him on as a NATO member. But anyway, they're all about the badges this year. Why Klaus needs one of those, I don't know. I think everybody knows who he is. So why does he need a badge? Yeah. He should get put through immediately.
Well, no one could be exempt from the class system. We're all part of the class system. We all have to be, categorized.
That's right.
I guess.
That's right. So I suppose that we can start with. Do you want to start with Klaus? Do you just want to begin there?
Sure.
All right. Klaus Schwab has his welcoming remarks as he takes the stage here. Again, this was not the opening ceremony, but this is what he brought up, and this is about 5 minutes. Okay, so bear with me. All right, and he talks in this clip about how our generation has reached a turning point, and we are on the precipice of what could lead to extinction of the human race.
No kidding.
No kidding.
Thank you, Angelic and Amen, for this musical opening of the meeting. Your Royal Highnesses, Excellencies, distinguished heads of state and government, Excellencies, dear partners and friends of the World Economic Forum, a very cordial welcome to the 2023 annual meeting. We are coming together under the motto, Cooperation in a Fragmented World. At the beginning of this year, we are confronted with unprecedented and multiple challenges. First, our global economy is undergoing deep transformation. The energy transition, the consequences of COVID, the reshaping of supply chains are all serving as catalytic forces for the economic transformation. And the hotspots of this geo-economic remodeling are high inflation, increasing interest rates, and growing national debt. This is particularly hurting low and middle income groups. It is exacerbating societal fragmentation. Second, the geopolitical system is also undergoing deep systemic transformation. Internationally, we are moving to what some people would call a messy patchwork of powers. There are superpowers, emerging powers, middle powers, regional powers, rogue states, and also large corporate and social media powers, all competing increasingly for power and influence. As a result, the trend is again moving towards increased fragmentation and confrontation. Thirdly, our generation has reached a turning point, confronted by truly existential problems: climate change, exploitation of nature, nuclear possible incidents, or even wars, extreme poverty, and viruses. They all can lead to an extinction of large parts of our global population. And we have seen how much dealing with those risks, such as COVID or global warming, have again fragmented populations. And finally, the fourth industrial revolution offers us tremendous opportunities, but at the same time, technologies as computing, quantum computing, blockchain, genetics, and so on, they also could create deep societal fragmentation. We have the ability to collaboratively build a more peaceful, resilient, inclusive, and sustainable world. But to do so, we need to overcome the most critical fragmentation. And the most critical fragmentation is between those who take a constructive attitude and those who are just bystanders, observers, and even go into the negative, critical, and confrontational attitude. But the spirit of Davos is positive, is constructive. It means investing into a greener and therefore more sustainable economy, investing into a more cohesive society by providing everyone with the appropriate skills and opportunities, investing into the hard and soft infrastructure that modern societies require. And here in Davos, it means, despite all those challenges, it means particularly investing in the spirit and the practice of solving problems through mutual respect and cooperation. We believe that we can do it, that through collective responsibility, innovation, human goodwill, and ingenuity, we have the capacity to turn the challenges into opportunities.
Where, oh where, should we begin with this one?
He concluded in a similar point that, Alan, has talked about before, like they'll make never let a good crisis go to waste. You got to use the window of opportunity. He sort of said something similar at the end there. And then also he made an interesting comment that there's those people who are sort of bystanders, or they take even a negative critical point of view. Whereas, where we here at Davos, our spirit is, we always solve the problems. We have a constructive point of view.
They're constructive, and anybody that doesn't agree with them are confrontational.
Yeah, basically what he's saying is that the things that his forum promotes are must-be's. And it's like the agendas that his forum promotes are must-be's, and anyone who doesn't like it basically is very negative and not solving the world's problems. Basically, you're just making things worse.
This entire thing, though, is based, everything that he's talking about, every single thing that he's up there spouting off about, this entire thing is based on the Hegelian dialectic of problem, reaction, solution. This entire thing. Mm-hmm. He's talking about supply chains. He's talking about inflation. He's talking about all these different crises, threatening
which you can't do anything about.
which you can't do anything about. Yeah. And you're talking more than 4. He listed more than 4 crises there. And then at the end, he's threatening you with death, saying, well, this is going to be a large-scale extinction event because of all these things. Again, something that you can't do anything about. Then the point that he went to that you were just mentioning about the constructive attitudes and the confrontational attitudes. I mean, all of these things, they're the ones that have created all of this, at least on the surface that we see. I mean, this is again, this is what we're meant to see. This is this group and this agenda that's being pushed out to the front. It's literally that. It's a front. That's what it's designed to do. They're being confrontational while saying that they're being constructive, and you're confrontational if you question it.
Yeah. I mean, like you look at something, like look at all the different problems and crises that he's brought up. In effect, the only way you could survive, like basically the only way an individual person could survive is if these agendas don't go forward. Like the climate change agenda, it's not sustainable to have you continue to live and exist as, at least not certainly at the same standard of living as you've been living. And so, in effect, these crises that he brings up, these problems that he brings up that he feels needs to be solved, necessarily, like the solution necessarily involves pretty well forcing large portions of the population to go extinct. So you're stuck in you're trapped. You can't really escape your fate if you believe that all these problems as they are presented. Also, another thing that, and I was listening to Noel Allen talk, and he mentioned this point. The World Economic Forum, the WEF, it's few. If you look at it backwards, it's few backwards, and the reason why it's few backwards, or like WEF is few backwards, is because the reason why they named it that is because it's a system designed where all the wealth goes to the few, and then the people at the bottom are left whatever their overlords decide that they are going to allow them to have. And that's pretty much the summary of what their agenda, the effect of their agenda is ultimately going to be.
Bruce, your thoughts on the executive chairman's opening speech there?
I especially liked the various problems, like when he was talking about economic change or the reforming of it. I especially liked all the various problems that are triggering the economic transformation. All of those are fabricated. Not one of those problems are an actual, genuine, this just happened, it was unexpected. No, all of these were planned. The energy crisis, planned. Mm-hmm. Logistical issues, planned. Pandemic, I argue, planned. All the stuff that we've had problems with were planned instances. The only one that you could say is it was planned, but kind of not, like the Ukraine, right? Russia, Ukraine. Mm-hmm. That was planned, but it was when you get into war stuff, it's I take a little bit of a lighter stance on that one, because it's like one side could plan it and then it just gets exploited. Don't let any crisis go to waste. So this one may not have been planned to the same levels that the other ones were, by the same people, if you will. But I think it was planned nonetheless. And then you get into the other things he talks about. Those are all planned instances. This is all being engineered to try to push us into this fourth industrial revolution that he's talking about. So yeah, I especially liked that part of it.
Yeah, the transition that he's the economic transition, and that he's talking about. None of these things are popular, like the digital currencies, the whole blockchain idea. I mean, no one even understands blockchain, really. I mean, there are some people to do, but it's deliberately been made difficult to understand. I remember when blockchain was first coming out, Alan was reading articles about it. He's like, I can't make heads or tails of this. It's all a bunch of gibberish, because they weren't willing to explain it to anybody.
He was a very well-read, very well-researched individual. So, I mean, he would dig down into something. I mean, dig.
Yeah.
And if he couldn't figure out the complexity of that, then how do they expect the average person?
It was deliberately worded to confuse you. Yeah. Yeah. And then let's see what else. What other of course, then you have the smart technologies, the surveillance, which is stepping up. I think we linked an article on Sunday on that. Like the surveillance systems, they're just continuing to expand it even further and further. I think in London they have the ultra low emissions zone that they're trying to expand to outer London, Sadiq Khan. And part of that is that they have to have more surveillance so they can keep track of all the different people who are leaving and entering and leaving the city, leaving the area, so they can charge you 12.5 pounds or whatever it is if you go over your limit. Each time you go over your limit of how much you're allowed to travel. And remember, UK is the most surveilled society in the world. especially London. I think London has like the most security cameras in the world or something, and they're still just keep on expanding it. And the other countries are doing similar, just not quite as advanced as London is. But I mean, the other it's the same all over the world. I think even Rwanda, like is one of the lighthouse countries of the World Economic Forum, and even in Rwanda, they have like a mobile payments, like a digital type payment system going up. They're trying to implement, like countries you wouldn't even think would be trying to implement, digital only type payments, like
Nigeria was a test ground for them. Yeah, Nigeria was a test ground for them. They tried it. They had the reason they tested it in Nigeria. I remember seeing the statistics on this, and Nigeria was one of the countries in the world that had the largest uptake of Bitcoin usage, as in the population down there. They really took to it. I want to say it was an overwhelming number. It was like in the 70 to 80 percentile range of the population that actually believed in it and understood it and knew how to use it, and they would. But they tried to implement the digital currency through their central bank in Nigeria, and they said, well, we're going to try this because we've had such an uptake of cryptocurrency, so we're going to see how the population responds to this. It bombed. It bombed miserably. It was a dismal failure. It ended up being 1 in 25 was the uptake on it. The reason is because it came with restrictions. People didn't want the government and the central bank to know what their transactions were all about. They don't want to have a LoJack system shoved up. Well, it's a family show. I'm not going to go there, but they don't want the higher ups, or the few, if you will, as you mentioned. They don't want those people to know what they're doing. And that's just common sense. I don't care that some moron that was born with a celestial silver spoon in her mouth is sitting up there on a stage in Davos saying, well, the future of government is financial rule because that's going to give us clarity. No, lady, that's going to give you abject control over a population. I'm not interested in giving you any of my data.
In China, with the thing that they have there and the protests that have been going on recently about because they got another lockdown there. In fact, Haas from the CFR, he said his predictions for 2023, China's they want to attack Taiwan, or they want to take over Taiwan, but they're not going to because they're going to be bogged down by this upsurge in COVID cases. So even the CFR is like, yeah, it's going to be busy with this one. But was that the restrictions there are such. Richard Haas of the CFR.
Okay, all right, I'm just making sure.
Yeah. And we posted an article on this on Sunday, but if you look at what's going on in China, they're getting people who will go, or like they'll try to travel somewhere, for to protest, and then they'll get, suddenly their badge will turn red, or it's like suddenly they'll turn yellow and they need to get tested, and or something, and then of course. Even though they get tested negative in one area, they'll have to do it again, and then they'll be red. And basically, what people are realizing is that the government is arbitrarily using this to basically halt the movements of people and make them quarantine people they don't like, people who they know are going to, because they have massive surveillance. They know they're going to do things that the government doesn't want them to do, and so they're just like, well, we'll just make your pass red, and we'll force you to go stop. And you can imagine with central bank digital currency. And it's already like this. You heard about January 6th people having their bank accounts frozen. The Canadian truckers having their bank accounts frozen. But with central bank digital currency, one currency is all currency is tied to the central bank. If the central bank has all control of the currency, and you say, well, we don't like you. We don't like what you do. We don't like what you say. And so your bank account's frozen. I mean, that'll get you to stop because you need to travel or certainly can't afford to feed yourself or anything. So, I mean, that's one way.
It ties into the whole metaverse, VR, and also social media in general. They're already tracking you. As an example, this is kind of a story that's been brought up multiple times by mostly conservative speaking individuals, but talking about there was she was underage at the time. I think she was like 16 years old, some dude's daughter. She was getting advertisements in the mail and all kinds of stuff for basically from the local grocery store. It was a chain for like diapers and that's stuff that you would need for if you were pregnant, maternity stuff. The dad was angry about that and addressed it with the grocery store or the Walmart or Kmart or something like that. And come to find out, his daughter was hiding the fact that she was pregnant, and the grocery stores knew that before he did, just based upon her buying habits or what she was just looking at, where she was in the store. So that was easily 6-8 years ago. when that happened.
Do you think that was Target? Was the store? Because I remember a story like that. But
it could have been Target. Yeah, that's very possible. So they're already doing that if you just have a centralized system to link all the data coming in, from like the metaverse, where you're just hanging out with friends or coworkers or something, and you're talking freely and openly about your views or day-to-day stuff, or social media, your direct messages or emails or any of that. That's all tracked. And if there's anything in there that the central bank doesn't like, that the greater apparatus doesn't like, they'll cut you off. You're a problem. You're going to have to go to re-education, or you're going to have to go. I mean, that's what it's going to. You're going to have to quarantine in the case of China, because you have conflicting ideas.
No. See, you're in error there, comrade. So I have to correct you. The vice premier of the Chinese Communist Party spoke this morning at the World Economic Forum and said that there's no problem in China. Everything's back to normal. There's no issue at all. There's no problem with the population. As a matter of fact, he extended an official invitation to their international friends and to the international community to come and visit China at your leisure. And it just so happens that Anthony Blinken, our Secretary of State, I think he is, or something like that, he is going to be visiting China in approximately 2 weeks from now. He's going to be on an official visit there. It just so happens that he also happens to be the guy that was over the Biden Center at University of Pennsylvania. I don't know. I don't know. I'm sure that there's no correlation there whatsoever. Bruce, you were nodding your head. Are you not? You're not anxious to hop on a plane and go visit our international friends over in communist China?
Well, I was at first going to say he'll come back with some new variant of COVID because, that's where it originated. But then you shot that down as you continued, because you brought up the fact that the connections between the Biden administration and China. And it just reminded me that that office fiasco with the intel there, the top secret documents, it just reminded me that university received more donations from the CCP than any other university in America by a large factor. Actually, I think it was like, what was it, 35 million? I'm wanting to say off the top of my head, something like that.
And who ran that office? Who ran that office at University of Pennsylvania, the Biden Center there? Who ran that? It was Anthony Blinken.
Yeah. So interesting. And they just happen to have top secret documents there that I'm struggling with that one. And this is kind of a bunny trail, but I'm still struggling with the fact that his lawyers were allowed to go through those documents. The president of the United States, who had basically control over what's classified and what's not classified, his lawyers were not allowed to go over his documents in the Mar-a-Lago raid. I'm struggling they
were classified.
Oh, yeah.
You see, Trump's a criminal. That's what's going on here. Trump's a criminal. So, all right, getting back to this nice rabbit trail we went down there, but getting back to this idea of this control society, right? This biometric prison that they want to build. Everything hinges upon this idea that they're throwing at us now called a 15-minute city. And we discussed this briefly yesterday. Why do you need a car? Why do you need a car? Why do you feel like you need to go out and pollute and consume oil? Why do you feel like you need to do that? Why do you feel like you need to increase your carbon footprint? Well, there just so happens to be a gentleman here by the name of Bastian Giraud, who is a member of the Swiss National Council. And he's going to tell you why a 15-minute city is a great idea.
Yeah, so I think what's important for policy is really to change the rules of the game, no? So that sustainability becomes the easier choice, not just for the people, but also for the companies, no? So I think an important measure in Switzerland was to have support for renewable energy, for energy efficiency, but also then changing the way districts work. For instance, in Zurich, we have a lot of districts where you actually don't need a car because all the activities, school, buying something, everything you can do in walking distance, And by doing that, people don't buy a car And it's not felt like actually they would like to have a car and they are not allowed to have it, but they simply don't need it because the environment was built in a way that they don't need it. And I think this is what policy needs to do. They have to change the environment. So a sustainable lifestyle, a lifestyle in harmony with nature is the easiest way to go. And also for the companies. No? And here perhaps a last point. I really like what you said on following through. No, we had all these nice commitments. We had the Paris Agreement. We also here at World Economic Forum have every year very nice commitments. What's important is really to follow through and also to also shed the light. Sometimes you're very critical with those who are acting, say there are, and we need to be critical, no, and see that there's no greenwashing, but we should also put the light on those who are not acting. And I think policy needs to try, and I think, for instance, Biden's suggestion that the government only buys with companies who commit to Paris, who commit to science-based targets. I think that's a smart policy. So that policy tries to leverage also the action from companies and somehow gets all companies to act. No, I think this is a smart way to do politics. In the end, policy need also to be smart because again, we need to have the buy-in from all the population, else we're not re-elected and change is not happening. No, so it needs to be smart policy, which is at the same time also transformative. No,
neither one of you look impressed.
Yeah, I mean, basically, from what I'm getting from it, from that talk he gave, he's saying that it's not like you won't be able to have a car. It's just that we're going to make it so that you won't need one. And really, what I think he was trying to say, I think he didn't say this, but I think he was trying to say it's like you won't want one either because they're going to train you not to want one. I think that's really the idea. It's basically they're going to make it so penalizing and punishing that yeah, sure, theoretically you could have a car, but you just won't want one. I think that's really where they're going with it.
It all hinges around the fact that you live in a major metropolitan area. Like they haven't, none of these people have lived outside of their ivory towers in some city somewhere, some plastic city somewhere. They've never lived outside of that. They think that they're going to be designing the future based around that. And everything else becomes irrelevant. They're going to have vertically integrated manufactured food supply places that are owned by Bill Gates. And that's what they think they're going to sustain things from. And it's just nonsense. It's complete nonsense. They don't take into account. Awful. It does sound awful. It sounds just god awful, just gray, stagnant, just disgusting is what it sounds like.
Well, it's like the map, what was it, Agenda 2021, I believe it was?
Yeah, they were hoping to have that done by 21, yeah.
Yeah, well, we've talked about that map before, and I think we've posted it on Telegram before, where basically the only place you're allowed to live is in the major cities. You're not allowed to live outside in the rural areas. So in this case, a car wouldn't be as needed, as it were, because well, you're all within a 15-minute city. It was interesting. Some of the things he was pointing out there. I have a kick about efficiency and actual green energy, specifically green energy with a blue hue to it. Fusion and fission. Currently, we have fission, but we're working towards fusion. Great efficiency with that. It's very clean. It's the safest energy source that we have currently, and yet that's one of the things that they're not pushing towards, at least not in the U.S. anyway.
Well, I think one of the reasons for that is, and correct me if I'm wrong, the reason that they're not pushing for that is because it doesn't fit with their agenda because it's not, quote, sustainable. So it's not one of these sustainable energy sources that they can tout. There's no way that they can talk around that either.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that they're doing it. But to his point about efficiency, if they would get out of the way and allow businesses a free market system to function, it tries to find the most efficient way inherently. Because as a business owner, I want to make my business as efficient as possible so that I reduce my costs as best as possible. So inherently, the system, it drives towards more efficiency. So if they'd get out of the way and let people, create and find these innovations, we will become more efficient over time. They're pushing us into a control mechanism. That's the entire point of this, is they're pushing us into something that they have full control of.
Yeah, they also don't want more consumption. They want less consumption. They want people to use less resources, because people don't want that, because, they want to live and they want to be happy and they want to be comfortable. And so, basically they try to spin it as if it's good for you, as if they're benefiting you, but they don't know, no matter how you cut it, it's madness, and it's really harming a lot of people, especially low and middle income people, which Klaus Schwab himself said, yeah, a lot of low and middle income people are hurting right now.
Gee, Klaus, I wonder why that is. Well, let's take a look at where they want to push everybody. And, we've surmised kind of the ideas of where they want to shove everybody. They want to shove everybody into this metaverse, don't they? They talk about dumping $1 trillion into the metaverse because that's what they estimate by 2025 that it's going to generate. How about you look at reality and stop living in a dream world, and you look at the fact that Meta has lost $1 trillion in the last 12 months? How about you look at that statistic? Oh, no, we're not supposed to look at that. We can't look at that. But Klaus Schwab, he seems fascinated by this and the capabilities of it. Let's hear what he has to say.
It's a journey. We may have seen the first applications. I have to say, for me, it was first experience to use an avatar, but I got so fast accustomed to it, so I'm fascinated by the capabilities which we have. And I know it will take some time, but for me, this is the next phase, the next big phase of development in the virtual world. And we are very proud that together with our partners, we can work on creating the first use of this technology for the public good.
Klaus, thank you very much. Julie, Accenture are already using the metaverse on quite a massive scale internally. Can you talk a little bit about your engagement with this project and also about the wider applications for the metaverse in business?
Great. Well, let's start with business, and we'll start with one number, $1 trillion. So that is what we estimate by 2025 the metaverse will influence in revenue in the private sector. And that really is going to cross 3 big areas. So it's super simple: consumer, enterprise, and industrial.
Oh, how convenient all of that is, and how seamless they make it sound. Aren't you going to be just filled with excitement when you see an avatar of Klaus Schwab walking up to you in the metaverse? Aren't you going to be happy about that? You see, he was shocked at how easy it was for him to just take on that new adventure, and he sees all of that potential there. Weston, in prep, you talked about how they've been designing this template for these avatars for decades now, and now they want to upload all of this, and I guess, for lack of a better term, they literally want to push all of this now into this digital world, because, just as we talked in the last segment about how god-awful and stagnant and gray and miserable the real world is that they're making, they want to push everybody into this to make it seem like it's all flowery and a utopia in there, as opposed to the hell that you're going to be living in.
And that's just a secondary use of it. Basically, what this metaverse idea, the VR idea, is it's again like the military. It's invented the technology for its own purposes, or intelligence agencies invent it for their own purposes, and then they make a consumer. They repurpose it for the general public at large, just to make money. The military-industrial complex does this for all sorts of things. I think they did it with the microwave. They did it with various kinds of weaponry and so on. And so basically, what they use it for, what the military has been using it for decades now, is they use the simulations to try. They basically capture tons of data about you, about organizations, about all sorts of the governments of the world and so on. Various foreign governments, various foreign militaries. And they create simulations where they try to predict what you would do if such and such a policy were enacted, or if some disaster happened, like the water supply was poisoned or something. Well, how would you react? How would you react? And that's what the military has been using virtual worlds for. And apparently, Melissa just uncovered a Verge article from 2019 that talked about this sentient project that the NRO, National Reconnaissance Office, I think it's under the Air Force or Navy or something. It's not a well-known agency, but they've been doing it. They have their own sentient brain project where they're basically trying to create, little sentient U's, sentient. They try to, they predict what everybody's trying to, all the different actors in the world are trying to do, and it's classified, so you can't really know that much about it. And I think a lot of the military has quite a few different programs. It's not just one or two things. Like they have a lot, and that's just the U.S. Never mind what all the other countries are doing. And so they have that use for it. Okay, but apparently they actually quite like that use of it a lot, because I think the guy from Purdue University, Chakravarty is his name. He was getting millions of dollars in contracts, and this is one person, one computer scientist person. Never mind, there's hundreds of them, if not thousands, working on these sort of simulations. They're getting lots and lots of money to make them. So presumably they find these simulations quite effective, unlike the computer models that we're given about the pandemics and so on, which always turn out to be rubbish. But since they've developed all these incredibly complex simulations and they can really, imitate real life quite closely, now they're giving it out to the public. Another thing that was happening, like the ModSim World conferences that Melissa and I found on Sunday, because we were looking into Chakravarty, and Chakravarty's latest paper was given at the ModSim conference in 2020. It was about, the policy impacts on societal behavior or something, something like, just like Alan would say, that's exactly what they use these simulations for. And where they try to predict what you're going to do before you do it, before any policy is interacted. They want to know, okay, how would you react? Who are the people who are going to be against this, and how are they going to try and counter it? And then they figure, okay, if they do that, then we'll do this then. And then, okay, if we did this, okay, then what would they do? And then they run all this stuff long before they enact any policy. That's really what we live under. And I think it's very clear to see with the COVID policies and the widespread adoption, the coercive, and how I think it's in the billions at this point. And the majority of the world has gotten the COVID vaccine, and like that's on the massive, never been done before scale. Like, how did they get that? How did they make it so successful? Especially when we had so many alternate media voices, coming out against it. It's still ongoing, and the governments still have not withdrawn it, even though many different scientists, leading researchers, have come out and said, different professionals, they're saying, withdraw the vaccine. There's been lots of adverse, and yet they're still going on with it. They've done the simulations. They've run the scenario. They know what they can get away with, and then I know Neil Ferguson claimed that they didn't realize that the China lockdown policies that they enacted in Britain would actually work. They didn't think that people would actually obey, but I mean, that was his personal opinion.
Well,
I think that the intelligence agencies really didn't know. Yeah, they're going to be able to implement.
Well,
they do.
Yes and no. Yes and no, as far as like being adopted. I covered this yesterday because they were talking about that in one of their working papers at the World Economic Forum. They say, well, with the widespread adoption of the COVID policies, no, these were not adopted. They were forced because you told people you're going to do this or we're going to fine you $15,000 and we're going to throw you in jail.
Yeah.
That's not adoption. That's forcing you and that's coercing you to do something. You're not going to get society reopened until you take this vaccine and you take this passport. Oh, but it doesn't stop transmission. It doesn't stop you from contracting COVID. Well, then what's the point of the passport if that's the case?
You still have to wear a mask too.
Yeah, you still have to wear a mask. It's like, well, then first you didn't, then you did, and then you didn't, and then you had to wear two, and it's just ridiculous. It's nonsensical. Yeah. So yeah, I wouldn't call that adoption, but at the same time, I guess that's not wrong either. Because
that's what they figured out would work, but through their simulations, I bet because they did that at Event 201 and many other pandemic scenarios, that tabletop exercises and so on, where they discussed, okay, how will if this happened, how could we get people to do what we want them to do, and so on. But yeah, I mean, there's been Dr. Joseph Freeman was one that we had linked to on Sunday. When Melissa told me to link first, look it up, Louisiana, she said, search for Louisiana ER doc calls, drawing the COVID-19 mRNA vaccines. And I searched for it on DuckDuckGo. I'm sure it'd be similar sorts of results for other search engine. Nothing came up, but a bunch of ER docs just saying that the vaccine's great, take the vaccine. But then I searched, if you go to the news tab in DuckDuckGo, finally I got an India Times article about the Louisiana ER doc, Dr. Joseph Freeman, saying, yeah, this needs to be halted. We did a study showing that 1 in 800 people are getting adverse events. And even though when it was just our study when it first came out, we didn't think it warranted withdrawing vaccines, but there's been other studies showing similar sorts of results where there's just been tons of adverse events associated with this vaccine, and so it should be halted. It should be withdrawn from the market. And it hasn't, and I don't think it will, because there's so many professionals the whole time, the whole COVID lockdown. You had the Great Barrington Declaration and so on. There's so many professionals that come out against all the different COVID policies, and the governments really have not relented at all. I guess they've got their. All I can say is that they've really done a great job from their perspective, from their goals. They've disrupted the supply chain. They've lowered people's standard of living. They've restricted people's ability to travel. All these goals that they were wanting as parts of the SDGs, they're getting through the pandemic, or at least partially through the pandemic. And then, of course, they're still going to continue with climate change. They're still going to continue with sustainability and build the 15-minute. Actually, Scotland's going to do 20-minute cities. That recently came out. Scotland's going to do 20 minutes.
Is that because the Scots can't get somewhere in 15 minutes, so it takes them an extra 5? Is that why they're doing it?
I guess. I don't know why it was 20 instead of 15. I guess they just looked at their cities and they're like, well, with our layout of our city, we don't have to rebuild everything. So we're like, so they're thinking, well, we'll just make it 20 minutes, and it'll work. We'll be able to have all the food, the hospital, school, all within walking distance. Maybe that was it. I really don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I'm glad you brought that up. We can spend a little bit extra time on this. So the FAA today, the Federal Aviation Administration, has very quietly, they've released a report saying that EKGs, so the electrocardiograms, that their pilots have to take in order to be approved to fly, and that they're going to be in good shape and everything, to have their cardiovascular system checked and their heart checked and everything else. They say that the EKGs of pilots are no longer normal, and we should be concerned. Not only should we be concerned, we should be very concerned. Why is that? And then, just as Bruce and I covered last week, you've got non-vaccinated pilots that are being bombarded with offers from a lot of those people that are sitting down there in Davos right now that flew in there on their 2,000 private jets. They're looking for specifically non-vaccinated pilots and crew. In fact, it is a requirement that you be unvaccinated. Why is that? But yet this FAA report, why is that? And as you said, the governments, they're not letting this one go. They will not let it go.
Yeah.
And I don't get why. I mean, I understand cutting your losses and walking away, but they won't release the states of emergency. Biden actually just extended the U.S. state of emergency for COVID.
Yeah.
And I think it goes back to what Ned has talked about time and again, and that's that umbrella. They've got that umbrella, that security umbrella up with the states of emergency. Every country in the Western world is still, as far as I know, unless something has changed, everyone is still under a state of emergency for COVID. And the reason is it allows them to keep certain restrictions in place. If there's no state of emergency, then that means all the restrictions everywhere have to go. And they're still in place in a lot of places, and they're still pushing jabs in a lot of places. They're still pushing the testing and everything else. If there's no state of emergency, they can't have any of that. None of that can be there. And then once that comes down, then we can start talking about legal accountability. And they don't want any accountability. Yeah. That is going to remain in place. That's going to be one of their bulwarks that they just leave there. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I told you in prep that I wanted to work this in. And since you brought that up, we'll do this. I want to take you back to 1976. Okay, 1976. This is the 11 o'clock news in Detroit, Michigan in 1976 during the first swine flu outbreak, not the one of 2008, 2009, which I fully believe that was a beta test for what we're dealing with COVID, but the first swine flu outbreak. And they're discussing the vaccinations that they were giving out for swine flu. Compare what happened then to now.
This is Channel 7's 11 o'clock Action News with Bill Bonds, John Kelly, and Detroit's #1 news team.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Bill Bonds, and here's a look at what's happening tonight. And what's happening is that the swine flu vaccination program ground to a halt from coast to coast today. There have been now 12 reported deaths so far, with victims dying just a few hours after receiving those inoculative shots. All of the victims were elderly persons, and all, we are told, died of apparent heart attacks. In the state of Michigan, the state health director, Maurice Risen, ordered a stop to all swine flu shots after 3 Michigan men died hours after receiving their vaccinations. Health officials estimate that 10,000 Michigan people have already received their shots, and President Gerald Ford told ABC Television News tonight that he intends to get his vaccination.
And I do believe, speaking to people that I have spoken to from back then, I do believe that the total number that died as a result of the vaccine that they put on back then was, I believe it was 25 was the total number, ended up being the total number that was directly related to someone taking the swine flu vaccine. And they shut it down. After 12, you heard right there, after 12, they shut it down because of heart attacks. I can't keep up with the amount of cardiac events on a daily basis now. I can't keep up with it. It's beyond my level of comprehension. Every day now, it's at least a dozen that I can see, and I'm sure there's probably more than that, but it's at least a dozen headlines that I see somewhere in the world of someone at a young age, not elderly, at a young age, someone between the ages of, hell, we've seen all the way down to 6 years old, and infants with blood transfusions, but we've seen 18 to 39, that age range, somewhere along in there. We're seeing that demographic being hit the hardest. Our demographic, the millennial generation, we're seeing that being hit the hardest. Mm-hmm. But you see how far we've moved from 1976 till now.
Yeah, we're much more totalitarian, aren't we? We're much more. I think Alan said when the pandemic was going to happen, which he's talking back in 2008 or something. He said you're going to see them come out, and they're going to be the more obvious, the more obvious that they're wrong, that their policies aren't really helping the people and so on, the more determined, the more dogmatic they're going to be about their policies. Like they're not going to allow any debate and stuff like that because they know darn well it's not benefiting, it's actually hurting the people. But they can't, and they're not going to, and that's what they want, and they're not going to relent because, it's doing what they want, and you have no power, you're just a peon, you're just the general public, and they just ram things through. And whereas, back in 1976, we had still, at least, I don't think we had true democracy, but we had there was much more of a effort to keep up appearances and to make sure that the public at least believed that the government was good and was generally there to help. Whereas they don't even bother much with that anymore so much because really we got much more advanced surveillance. First of all, in fact, with COVID policy, part of the COVID emergency powers is that they can more surveillance with the apps and so on. They can, again, it's come out already. We linked an article to that on Sunday saying that they're using the data that they're collecting from these apps, not just to see if you have COVID or just to track COVID people. They're using it to track all sorts of criminals and so on, the police agencies and so on. So, the government's just, taking advantage of it. And because we're such a much, we have the computer and internet and everything, tracking, so surveillance, this part, so they feel much more safer because they know who we are and they know exactly what we're doing at all times, pretty much. Or where we are at all times at the very least. So that's part of the reason why we have more totalitarianism. I think a large part of it is we've been worked on for decades. With drugs and just the culture in general is a lot worse. We've had increase in autism. We've had food supplies not as we've had all sorts of GMO foods forced on us. Fluoride in the water's been for decades now. We had. Let's see, what else we the childhood inoculation, especially in the United States. The United States, I think, has more childhood inoculations than any other country. We've had, basically, we've just lost lots of freedom, really, is what's happened. It's no longer the good old days. I don't know how else to put it, even though, even the good old days were not necessarily good old days, but you still had some freedoms. You still could, go out and travel wherever you wanted. You could say whatever you wanted, pretty much. You could, you could wear what you wanted. You didn't have to wear a mask anywhere. I don't think there was a masking policy. Although allegedly during the 1918 flu, I think they did have masking at that. But even then, it didn't last for anywhere near as long as just COVID has now. We're going on 3 years now. So yeah, that's that news clip. Thank you for showing us that. I think it's very telling. I mean, you could just the comparison between then and now is just
Yeah, and I just so happen to have a photo here from the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. And as you can see, back then, just like today, it didn't affect the upper class, the masks. Mm-hmm. So wow, they didn't have to wear them any more back then than they did today.
Not surprising. Figures.
Uh-huh. Bruce, you want to jump in there? Because I have one last clip of Klaus that I would like to play. Would you prefer that I do that first, or would you like to comment on everything thus far?
I was just going to throw in a little bit with the COVID rhetoric that's going on right now with the elite, and comparing it to the 1970s video you had there. one of the other things that they were talking about with in comparing, which by the way, real quick, I did a quick run on the numbers. That was basically 1 in 1,000. Basically, it's 0.12 percent from the numbers that they gave. The 10,000 people took the jab. They had 12 deaths. That's not that doesn't even come close to how many people had taken it and had adverse effects and those kind of things. Even just adverse effects is enough to shut down a vaccine in past days. Whereas this one, we have millions of people around the world that are maimed because of this jab, and they're still pushing it. They're still telling you have to go out there and get the jab. So, yeah. But we even have nowadays, we have constitutional lawyers basically saying the government can go in technically and jab you by force. The Constitution more or less protects them because the Constitution doesn't really address that. And I just wanted to point out that this particular lawyer, he's missing the fact that the federal government does not have that say, number one. It's technically all powers not given to the federal government is given to the state. And when you look at the preamble to the Constitution, it says health is something that government can give advisory roles to. Like they can advise you on health. They cannot force you to do things. As the Declaration says, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life entails medical procedures, in my opinion, because, things that pertains to your body, that's your life. That's so the government has no say over that, in my opinion. But it's as you pointed out, Weston, how much things have changed from back then. You had the illusion of more freedoms back then than we do now. And I think that was one of the things that they understood back then, is that the government doesn't have control over your body. Because basically what this constitutional lawyer is saying, you're a slave to the government. That's basically what he's saying. And the news he was on, of course, did not push back or ask any other further questions or anything on that idea.
Yeah, and don't make no mistake, you are a slave if they can force you to take, inject something into your body. I mean, because not only could they possibly kill you, I mean, they could lobotomize you. In fact, that's, what Alan has talked about many times, is that's probably one of the reasons why they push vaccination in general so hard. Who knows what else they could, they could modify, now they have this mRNA technology where they can edit your genes or affect how your genes are expressed or something, or different genetic gene therapy, I guess is what that's called, techniques that they can use now. So really, this is you're modified however they want to modify you, and that means you have very little say over your life if you can't, refuse to take something into your body.
I think it's also fascinating the way that this agenda has been and is continuing to play out. If you go back to the start at its inception, so lockdowns, right? First, they had to scare the hell out of everybody to force everybody into a lockdown situation, right? Once you were there, your perception was monopolized. You had all dissenting voices, or a goodly percentage of them, shut down. Everybody that was talking against the narrative and everything else, they were all taken off of the usual tech platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Google. You removed from search results and everything else. You guys, I think, before even, what was it, like 2 years ago? You guys were canceled before all of this. You guys caught the first round of cancellation before COVID even started. But that just served as a bellwether for what was to come. And I believe that it'll continuously get worse as these people continue to fail going forward. But you had the lockdowns, and Klaus even mentioned that you had the lockdowns that were a major part in the breaking of the supply chains. Okay, well, let's go from the lockdowns. They use the lockdowns to do what? To force you to take a vaccine against your will, because they dangled the little carrot out there in front of you saying, well, if you want things to open up, this is what you got to do. Don't think about just yourself. Think about everyone else, right? Once they got that turned on, right? Once they turned on the fear, and that's what it was. They scared you into compliance. I don't think that the fear that they used then is going to be anything compared to the fear that they're going to instill in people that have taken it, as in what's going to happen to them since they've taken it. You notice now that things are starting to come out. They can't hide the bodies anymore. They're piling up out in the open now. The freezers they're crammed full in the morgues. So now they're just dropping dead on the streets. That's a problem. That's a big problem. And then, of course, they're still pushing the jabs because that's what they do. They never admit fault. They always double down, just like a degenerate gambler. Never forget that. I think the campaign of fear going forward, planting that doubt into someone's mind about, oh my God, what did I do? What decision did I make? What brash decision did I make? Not thinking about it, just wanting things to go back to normal. I just wanted my freedom back. I just wanted to go on vacation. Of course, they're going to give you one last vacation. Of course they are. Why not, right? Because you're not going to be creating that carbon footprint much longer. Never forget what Klaus Schwab said early 2022 about our generation, the millennial generation. Because what did he say? What did he say when he had Justin Trudeau up there on the stage? The new world that we're going to build is going to be a young world. It's going to be a digital world. Well, to do that, you've got to get rid of everybody that's not young, right? Of course, they've had really, really bad problems with the younger kids, the school kids, the ones that are dropping dead after gym class. Those, yeah, you're having multiple casualties there. And then, of course, you're seeing the largest uptick in casualties in the 18 to 39 demographic, or 18 to 40 demographic. We're experiencing our demographic, our millennial generation. We are experiencing a Vietnam War every 12 months. Do you understand that? As in casualty rates. Does that wake you up? Is that a cause for concern to anybody? Does that resonate with anybody? Oh, no. Monday Night Football's on, right? Never forget what Klaus Schwab said to our generation specifically.
Waves of lockdowns and the stresses of finding work or returning to workplaces have even amplified the existential and often silent mental health crisis. So, what should you do? You, the millennials and the Generation Z, what should you do differently? Most immediately, you are calling for the international community to safeguard vaccine equity to respond to COVID-19 and prevent future health crises. Nobody will be safe if not everybody is vaccinated.
Don't do it for yourself. Do it for everyone else.
Certainly the elite won't feel safe until everybody's vaccinated. That's for sure. At least all the people down below.
That is true. We are out of time today. We're going to have to call this one done. Weston, I want to thank you for being here today. Again, Weston from cuttingthroughthematrix.com. I encourage all of our listeners to go over and give their website a look, and please do support them if you can. It's been an absolute pleasure, gentlemen. Thank you both for being here this evening. Thank you to all of the listeners. God bless all of you, and have a great evening.